Well, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to folks who are joining today from various parts of the world. We will get started shortly. Folks are still joining in, so let's give them a minute. Please stand by. All right, I think we have a sizable attendance on the webinar today, so let's get started. Hello, everyone. I'm DJ, the head of marketing at Entytle. First off, thank you so much for joining us. We expect the event runtime to be close to 25 minutes with a bit of Q&A built in towards the end. So with that, let's get going. Some rules of the road. Please use the Q&A area for questions to the panelists, the speaker. You'll find the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen along with all other buttons on your Zoom bar. So please use that for asking questions. There's also a chat button that you can use to raise any technical issues such as audio issues, etc. And we'll address that as soon as possible. We'll ship the recording and the presentation based on demand. So in case you need it, feel free to write to the email ID that's mentioned towards the end on the very last slide. Okay, so to introduce the speaker for the day, Vivek Joshi. Vivek is the CEO and co-founder of Entytle with decades of experience working on both sides of the industrial equation. He's passionate about all things install base and simplifying install base workflows to give customer-facing OEM teams an opportunity to do more with less. He's also the founder of the Industry Next community, which is designed to help industry leaders share and learn from each other. With that short introduction, let me go ahead and hand it over to Vivek.
DJ, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Good morning, good evening, and good afternoon to everybody dialing in today. There's a couple of people out here who I recognize in the audience. Good to see you all again. It's always good to see familiar faces in the audience as well. So again, thanks for joining us today. You know, we've been doing this series we call Transformation Thursdays with myself as a primary speaker for a couple of reasons. One is there's so much material to share with people. There's so much material that we need to kind of communicate to people, both in terms of written content, oral content, and visual content, that we thought it was good to kind of have a cadence of weekly webinars that we do different topics around this whole notion of aftermarket transformation. So that's really why we did it. The second thing is recognizing that, you know, sometimes with people need to just look for information, they need to look for data as they kind of think through their own processes, how to deal with the install base and aftermarket, and not everything is a sales discussion all the time, and it's just information gathering at times. And so we thought these are good, what we call low expectation, low expectation meetings where you gather information, ask questions, educate yourself, and move right along, and then get ready for your decision when the decision comes about, right? So these turn out to be really good. We've been really happy with the way these have been working out for both the recipients as well as ourselves, and we're going to continue this with different topics over time. So, you know, you keep watching this series, and we'll be able to put this on YouTube and kind of share this with you as well. So as DJ said, I'm the founder and CEO of Entytle. I've been at this for 9 years with Entytle, but almost 30 years in the industrial world. I have had so much experience that it is actually important to recognize that sometimes this experience gets just trapped in your head, and it's good to kind of share this with other people as well. So that's kind of what the intent of today is. You know, we're talking about a practical AI in the context of the aftermarket. And really, if I were to have a simple summary of what this next 20 minutes is about, it's really simple that the business leaders that we talk to don't really care about AI. They don't care about abacuses. They don't care about steam engines. They really care about business growth, right? That's really what the front and center topic is. AI just happens to be a tool, right? So that's how they think about it. But there's an elephant in the room we're going to address. I'm going to touch on it briefly today. As it turns out, when we build the deck, we just put one slide to this elephant. It should have been more slides, but I think we're going to be a separate discussion, separate webinar on this elephant in the room that we'll talk about. And then we're going to walk into some specific examples that we've put together on how we've deployed AI in the context of aftermarket, right? So that's kind of the takeaways that we'll kind of share with you today. So with that, I'm going to kind of dig into the presentation right away. So, you know, one of the things that I've seen over the last many years is that most people have been trying to drive price increase as a way to drive revenue increase. We've seen that time and time again. In fact, I've seen that a lot in the last couple of years where, thanks to inflation, thanks to some of the supply chain issues that happened, many manufacturers, quote unquote, got permission to just crank up prices. And as a result of cranking up prices, they've got some extraordinary revenue growth. And we've seen double-digit aftermarket revenue growth in virtually every one of our customers, right? But when I ask them the most obvious questions, hey, this is really good. How much of this was price and how much of this is volume? There's a bit of a sheepish look, and people say, yeah, well, I'd say a good 2/3 of it is price growth, only 1/3 volume. And that volume actually even isn't really well spread out volume. It's just really concentrated in some of the top customers who double down with the manufacturer, who double down with the particular products they're trying to do and maintain, and so on and so forth, right? So it's really a fine balance people are trying to do. So when you start taking a look at the volume increase situation, there's lots of different ways for OEMs to achieve this growth, right? We've just put in a few of these things out here in this chart. We have a open source playbook, is what we call it. There literally are 25, 30 different use cases, from frontline sales to marketing to product to service, and then of course the executive group that addresses these things as well, right? So there's a whole menu, if you may, of things you can do to drive volume growth. The big question is really then, when you start looking at this thing, what has not changed surprisingly to me is people still struggle with these same three questions, regardless of who you are, right? Whether you're with the HVAC manufacturer, an instrumentation company, life science instrumentation company, or a food packaging equipment company, or oil and gas company, right? They all have the same problems. Where's my stuff? I mean, we had a call the other day with the engine maker who candidly had a very difficult time tracing the engines they made. These are high horsepower engines that are sold into industrial environments, mining environments, but they literally cannot figure out where the engines went to, right? And they're trying to make a go out of the aftermarket business. But if you can't start with the first question, you can't figure out the others as well, right? So where's my stuff? What happened to it? And what do I do about it? Are really the questions people are trying to answer. And so you're probably saying, okay, Vivek, that's all well and good. Well, what the heck does AI have to do with any of this stuff? So I was like, holy horses, here we come, right? The problem is, every one of us who's been a practitioner in this business recognize that the data that we have today in an enterprise is unbelievably valuable. And what I mean by that, it has so much richness to it in terms of context, so much richness to it in terms of being able to analyze it, and so much richness to it in terms of providing perspective, recommendations, so on and so forth, to the user, which is really the customer-facing employee in our companies, right? But as we said in the beginning, there's an elephant in the room. It's called ugly, messy data. This picture that we see elicits head nods with every single customer and every single prospect we talk to, right? A, you got a ton of different systems out there that you're drawing data from. B, the data is 100% messy, right? It's a complete disaster and what data people handle. And as a result of that, you don't have the ability to start building insights and scalability across the whole thing. And people are relying on analysts. And we've literally had customers say to us like, yeah, well, I may get an intern to do this stuff for me this summer. It's like, okay, good luck. You got nothing done, which means you're telling me it's not that important to you if you have an intern doing some project for you, right? So we wind up with these situations where data is a mess. It's a non-scalable approach. And this, if you don't address this elephant in the room, none of what I'm going to show to you for the next few pages is ever going to be possible, right? So got to fix this infrastructure, got to fix this thing correctly, and we can go from there. So Vivek, what about AI? Well, McKinsey put this report out recently where they talked about all the different generative AI opportunities and all the different things can happen. And they identified three primary areas that are really where they think there's an impact out there. One of them is the notion of what do you call customer operations, which is all the tech support, operations, service, and so on and so forth. Well, the second is sales, and third is marketing, right? And guess what? All of them apply to aftermarket and service. So the question is, what do you want to do? How do you do it? And so on, in the context of answering those three questions that are hard to answer, right? So there's stuff that people are trying to do. Data's a mess. You think we can use AI. So maybe now let's talk about how we can apply those ideas to applying these, to making these things a reality, right? So that's kind of where we go from there. So the first things first is, and this really came to light to me when we first started Entytle, right? What was apparent that almost everybody we talked in the early days of Entytle said to me two or three different things. Vivek, we really don't understand what our customers' attributes are, what a customer's profile is, what a customer looks like, right? I know this sounds really uh, simplistic, but it is really hard when you have tens of thousands of customers who bought hundreds of thousands of equipment, or products, or machines from you. I mean, it really is a problem for most people, right? It isn't a trivial throwaway comment, but understanding a customer base is really, really hard. So there lies the first application of AI. So every time we get data from a customer, every time we get this whole data prepared, by the way, I talked about addressing the elephant in the room in the next webinar, or one of the upcoming webinars. We're going to have a complete session on how you take that manual mess that I showed you in the previous page and make sense of it in terms of clean data. We're going to have a session on that. I'm going to get one of our data science specialists from our team to come and talk about that along with me. So once you got the data prepared, we are able to take all this information, apply all kinds of clustering and cohorting techniques, which are really foundational to AI and machine learning, to kind of make this segmentation happen at scale. And really the idea then becomes, can you cluster by types of behavior? Can you cluster by industry types, which is the most obvious one? Can you cluster by usage rates, which are built on understanding the customer 360 and the chronological or time series history, and so on and so forth, right? So there's many, many different attributes, as the data science guys like to call it, in terms of being able to drive cohorting and clustering. And once you start doing the cohorting and clustering at scale, which is taking, in the case of one of our large customers, 170,000 unique customer locations and 2 million assets, making them into a certain handful of clusters. And I can't remember how many clusters we created for them, or cohorts of customers, but I think it's somewhere the 8 or 9 range. Once you do that, then the practitioners, then the experts, then the subject matter folks can then look at this and, yep, this sounds about right. The people in the refining sector, for example, behave this way. Or the people in the food and beverage industry behave this way. Or the food and the wastewater treatment industry behave this way, right? Once you start creating these cohorts, you can then start applying things like understand who's churning, which is a very SaaS term, which is, customers who are drifting away from you, people who are leaving or going to somebody else. And once you understand those cohorts and start trying to figure out what to do with them, then all kinds of different actions are possible. But first things first, create segments, create clusters, create cohorts by behaviors that you want to influence. And that is only possible using tons of, all these different techniques that the data science guys like to call k-means clustering and this, that, and the other. There's all these fancy terms people use, but that's kind of what the first step is: practical application of AI. The second practical application of AI is, once you got these clusters, once you got these big time series data stores, if you may, right? So imagine, again, this customer with 170,000 locations. We have 30 years of data from them, right? 30 years of data, 170,000, that's a rather large matrix of data. That provides some fascinating insights when we apply our purpose-built AI models to say, okay, can I understand how things are behaving? Which means to say, in a particular type of product, in a particular kind of industry, in a particular type of usage pattern, do I know how often they're replacing certain parts? Do I know how often they're doing certain services? Can I understand those time intervals, if you may? And those purchasing patterns are a proxy for replacement rates, failure rates, consumption rates, and so on and so forth. So we use that information and all the machine learning algorithms we build to predict and therefore prescribe next action, right? So when you think about what an experienced person does, she is continuously analyzing data about a customer, and they walk into a refinery and they can say, yes, we've got this water analysis instrument, and if it's a refinery, the odds that they have to go do X, Y, Z and such interval. It's knowledge that they've gained over time. It's pattern recognition that they're doing in their heads. But guess what? Not all of us have the luxury of being a 20, 30-year veteran, being able to understand these patterns and start doing these things automatically. The rest of us need help. And this is where this thing comes in, right? So you look at patterns, you look at how things are behaving, and you use that information to start predicting and prescribing stuff. In our case, what we do with it is predict and prescribe next best action in terms of either part replacements or service recommendation, consumable recommendations, and so on and so forth, to start creating leads and opportunities and making offers, right? And the idea is to start looking at all this data to say, if the interval is so much, what is the probability that something like this will happen in this cohort, and make that. And so people apply it for not just predictive and prescriptive part and consumable sales, but also for doing the excess and slow-moving inventory stuff that you see in the bottom box out there, right? So that's the second application, practical application of AI. The third practical application of AI that I'm going to talk about is what we call prioritizing sales opportunities using some form of propensity to buy scores, right? Now, this is a very commonly used approach or technique in the B2C world or consumer world, but there's a lot of stuff we can do in the enterprise manufacturing world that relates to these propensity scores as well, right? So we start looking at wallet share gaps. We start looking at how often people may buy stuff. We start looking at cross-selling opportunities, and then we basically start scoring all these things to kind of make sure that we can identify and start making recommendations based on propensity. We also use a whole bunch of different techniques to say, what are the other cross-selling opportunities we can make, which in the e-commerce world, people call collaborative filtering, right? And so those are the kinds of things that you see that are available with the propensity to buy collaborative filtering kind of scores, which is a third practical use of AI. The fourth practical use of AI is the collaborative filtering specifically. And so we use auto basket techniques, we use collaborative filtering techniques, we use, I forgot what the other term is. I'm not a data scientist, by the way, to kind of start making recommendations of, if people buy this, there's 70% probability to buy this part. Now, one might look at this, if you're an experienced salesperson or service person, and say, but of course, right? You know who buys what, depending on what product they bought. But again, in this world where there's a whole bunch of transition going on with experienced people transitioning out of the workforce, a whole bunch of new people coming in, the ability to automate this recommendation system is really high. And again, in the B2C world, it's very common. We've all grown up with Amazon and Netflix and other people making recommendations. It's really exactly the same technique you apply out here as well. So the intent out here is to, when a person calls in, or when a customer calls in for a product or a service, to offer them more than they ask for as a way to start cross-selling and increase the basket size, right? When you start creating bundles, when you start creating kits, that's going to increase your order size. That's going to create the value that's bigger and better for the customer and for yourself. And that's the way we are able to apply AI out here for the fourth time, right? And so when you start looking at all these approaches, all this needs to come together into a systematic whole. And this is where a little bit of the advertising portion of this presentation begins, right? So we built all these techniques, we built this data store. And so Vivek, how do you make this actionable? What do you do with it, right? And so for that, we built this purpose-built tool solution we call Install-Based Intelligence Platform for equipment makers, primarily OEMs. And it comes in 3 different forms and functions. One is a desktop application that you see out here in the main screenshot. The second is a telephone or mobile application. And the third mobile application is the tablet application, right? So we've got all 3 form factors in our application. This is a classic software as a service. It's used to drive workflows in the sales process and the marketing process. And now soon we're going to start introducing other workflows into this application, all tied with AI, all tied with data, all tied with making sure the end user becomes smart, using data faster to do things faster and cheaper and better. Now, clearly, this has been something we've been working for many years. We got tons of really good customers out there, so don't take my word for it, talk to them. This is a lot of stuff that's going on. Every one of them is practicing some aspect of this practical AI for their applications. We're very proud of some of our customers and the benefits they've got. I was in a call last week with one of our top customers, and they showed us that they literally made a 40% improvement, incremental growth improvement, thanks to Entytle, before and after Entytle, if you mean. 40%. So just to be clear, they were running at about 9% growth rate before Entytle and the aftermarket business. After Entytle, they are now 13%. And they were able to clearly attribute that 4% delta to many of the techniques that we talked about, right? They increased the number of transacting customers. They increased the basket size using some of these techniques. They made their people more efficient, so they got a huge productivity boost from the propensity and some other stuff. And fourthly, the customers are now transacting with them more and more. They're on a quote-unquote regular cadence, and so that starts really creating some great benefits out as well. So that's our customers. And really, if you think about Entitle's value proposition and why this is so important in pulling all these things together into the overall story, is we really believe that the value of a company is really tied to the value of the install base. An install base is an extraordinarily rich store of value for a customer, both in terms of revenue, in terms of margin, in terms of insights. And most companies really don't do a good job with it. So our vision really is to become what we call the central nervous system for an OEM's install base, right? We want to be able to kind of be there, be the nervous system that takes the signals in and just fires the synapses to get an action out. That is who we are trying to become. And therefore, our mission is to really make it simple and easy for every single OEM to manage the install base in a way that just becomes easy to kind of serve every single machine, every single person automatically. So that's kind of how we think about our journey. And everything we're doing at Entytle, everything we're doing in terms of our roadmap is really in terms of realizing the vision, right? So it's about that install-based platform. It's about that operating system and nervous system. We're doing a bunch of things out here. You can see in the last two columns on this page out here. We built an install-based data studio to make sure you know how to handle your data correctly. We're building out the Microsoft Teams integration for making sure the entire organization works on the same thing again and again. We're building custom data and AI solutions. And really, we're now beginning to start driving a whole bunch of applications that are all around driving a specific value on AI to our customers. So that's kind of where we are with this thing. We're excited about everything we built. Feel free to scan this QR code to see if there's any, to kind of benchmark your own aftermarket, how you stack up. We're happy to talk to you. Please write to us at info@entytle.com. And with that, I'm going to open this thing for questions. So DJ, over to you. I think we hit the 20-minute mark. We have another few minutes we can take questions.
Absolutely. Just in time, Vivek. Thank you so much for that. Okay, I think I've got a couple of questions, but they pretty much, everybody's surprisingly talking about data quality. So let me start with the first one. How to identify we have a data quality issue, anything measurable?
How to identify if a data quality issue. So I know this is going to sound very trite, but you just assume you have a data quality issue. Just because 100% of the customers we work with and we've seen have some really data quality issues from bad to worse. So the way we do it is one of the first things we do with the data when we receive it, we just pre-profile it. So effectively, we look at the data, we profile it to see how good or how bad it is. And there is some data quality score that we can assign to it, right? So I think there's a way to score the data in terms of quality. We do it. I don't know who else does it. But once you score your data quality, it can give you an idea for how much of a lift you have in terms of getting your data, quote unquote, in shape to get used for AI and other applications. So that's an indirect answer, DJ. Unfortunately, we do it for you is the way I can answer it.
All right. Also, Vivek, I think there are symptoms, right? Multiple tools that they've acquired over the years. I'm fairly certain there are symptoms that are common across all industries. We see them time and again. So it's multiple tools, maybe data silos. There's all of those proxies to a data quality issue that doesn't seem to be data quality, but they point to a much larger problem underneath.
Yeah, and I think what you just said there is actually important because data quality is not just if data is dirty, but data can be unreconciled. So to your point about silos and different systems, you may have a customer identified as A, B, C, D, E in a particular system, and it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in the other system, but they're all the same customer. So being able to reconcile customers across system is a data quality issue because if you don't reconcile them, you truly have no idea what that customer looks like, right? Or within the same system, you'll have 5 different records for the same customer. Right. One of you who's on the phone right now, I'm one of the participants on the webinar is somebody we've worked with over the last many years, and their data was just so bad. We actually found 32 different versions of the same customer and the same address with 32 different IDs, which is phenomenal, right? How do you know which is the right customer record? You don't. There's no integrity in the data, and so to your point, DJ, we see that just on that dispersion of data alone is a way to look at it. So it's a good point you made.
All right. So the next one again talks about data quality, and maybe we answered this already, but I'll go ahead and pose the question anyways. What percentage of customers that Entytle has started with had poor? I think that what they mean is what percentage of customers do you see who have data issues?
100%.
I kind of
100%.
expected that answer.
Yeah, I mean, I actually been surprised, but then not so any longer. That 100% of our customers, actually 100% of the people that we've talked to have just really, like I said, it's bad or it's worse, right? And there's some range in between. There's almost never any good data quality.
All right. And there's one more. I think that's the last question we'll take in. This is around the rollout time for an AI project. I think they're trying to make a comparison between doing something in-house versus, let's say, a solution like Entytle.
This is obviously a bit of a biased answer from my point of view, right? Because I've been in your shoes in the audience. I've been a industry operator, practitioner, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm on the software vendor side. And I can tell you this sounds terrible, but there's things you should do, there's things you shouldn't do, right? And so coming back to your, make versus buy, how long does it take? If you're going to go build your whole thing yourself and this entire AI journey, it'll just take you problematically too long, right? And what I mean problematically too long is you're going to run into the data quality issues that DJ talked about. That takes a long time for people to sort through. Then you got to think about what problems you want to solve and build the algorithms for that. To do that, you need some really phenomenal data scientists that are hard to get. And we get these stories where people have been at it for 2 or 3 years and haven't got anywhere, right? Versus Entytle, where we come in because we have a playbook, we have a templatized offering in terms of how we handle data, the algorithms that are already pre-built. They answer the same questions for all the different kind of companies. We're able to get up and running in somewhere between 8 to 10 weeks max, right? Which is phenomenal. 2 to 3 months is an amazingly fast time for an implementation like this. And the reason we're able to do this, not because we're so amazing, which we are immodestly, but it's because we are focused on specific questions and specific problems. We don't boil the ocean, right? If you boil the ocean, I guarantee it'll never get done. So be focused, be practical, get it done. But this whole notion of data prep and building the algorithms is not for the faint of heart, and it's not for the light of pocketbook, right? It takes a lot of time and money to do it. So I'll be very, very careful before you sign up to do something like this on your own. But it doesn't mean you shouldn't do something, because it's important for your company to understand some of these processes and some of these techniques. But don't go build a commercial system like this on your own.
I think that's just perfect advice, Vivek. All right. So those were the 3 questions that came in, and I think we're almost at time. So with that, we'll wrap it up, folks. You have the QR code on the screen. Feel free to scan this. Get your aftermarket maturity benchmark with global leaders. To take you to a link where you can either download an offline copy, or if you feel like you can go ahead and fill an online form, and it'll give you the results. So with that, Vivek, thank you so much for your time today and for running us through the practical applications of AI. We look forward to the next event, which will be next Thursday. And that's pretty much it.
Awesome. Thank you very much for participating in today's event, and hopefully we'll see you next time. Bye-bye. Good day.
All right. Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.